In today's media landscape, bias has become a growing concern, with many news outlets being accused of reporting events in a partial or prejudiced manner. This undermines the credibility of journalism, because it involves twisting facts, leaving out important information, or only reporting things that support their own ideas to push a specific agenda. Their news reports are driven more by revenue and market share, which is why their reports and opinion columns often only tell part of the truth. Even the former US president also criticized the media, calling them the enemy of the people, and said that they can cause war. Depending upon the side they favor, media outlets have been tactfully employing language, which is resulting in hate speech and warmongering. For instance, during the 2003 invasion of Iraq, some media outlets in the United States used language that fueled hatred and promoted the idea of war. Certain news networks described Iraq as an imminent threat to global security, using phrases like weapons of mass destruction and axis of evil, which heightened public fear and contributed to support for military action. A report by the Indian Institute for Mass Communication shows that Western media often report about India with unfair biases. It found that these reports or articles often have exaggerated headlines, but lack enough information to support their alarming claims. The report states that these publications have used the most negative and divisive words to ridicule India. In 500 headlines, the most used words were fear, hate, violence, riot, Hindu, Muslim, Kashmir, cow, mob, protest. The report suggests that these foreign media outlets have been trying to exploit alleged fault lines within India, focusing on controversies and potential contentious issues to attract more attention. Prejudice, ignorance, misinformation campaign. Almost every month, leading Western media outlets prominently feature India in a negative light. The Western media's depiction of India is like a stubborn relic of the past, echoing the disdainful tone of colonial-era English press. From pre-independence narratives to the present, their headlines paint India as if it was still under the thumb of colonial dominance. This is how the Jallianwala Bagh massacre of 1919 was reported by the Manchester Guardian. It said, "An astonishing story from India. Punjab meeting dispersed by fire in April troubles. Over 400 natives killed, 3 times as many wounded." Almost all British newspapers underplayed the magnitude of the massacre. The international media started reporting on the Jallianwala Bagh massacre after the Hunter Committee's findings were made public. However, General Dyer, the main person responsible, wasn't mentioned in news reports for months. In 1950, when India became a democratic republic, British press coverage cast doubts on whether democratic institutions could take root in India and address deep-seated issues of caste, religion, and regional identities. In 1971, all major Western media houses purposefully downplayed the massive refugee crisis that India faced when the Pakistan army launched a crackdown in the then East Pakistan. Furthermore, during the civil war in East Pakistan, the Western media unfairly targeted Indira Gandhi. They conveniently ignored the brutal suppression by the Pakistan army, aimed at crushing Bengali independence aspirations, and the Indian government's intervention, which eventually led to the creation of Bangladesh. Instead, Indira Gandhi was portrayed negatively by the Western press. The foul language that the US president and his team then used against her is on record. Surprisingly, neither the US press nor the people there condemned the language. Seasoned journalist Umesh Upadhyay's book, Western Media Narratives on India, From Gandhi to Modi, deals with the Western media. His book focuses on the bias of the Western media in its portrayal of India and its leaders. He analyzes how the media often misrepresents India and its government's performance. He begins by recalling the pro-Khalistan movement in Punjab during the 1980s, when he was in Canada, which has a significant Sikh population. He mentions that the appointment of Gyani Zail Singh as India's president was ignored by the newspapers. Instead, a bus accident in India was reported. The Western press also depicted former Deputy Prime Minister of India, Vallabhbhai Patel, as a troublemaker because he worked to integrate princely states into the Indian Union. In the past, getting information required a lot of physical resources, like books, encyclopedias, and libraries. Research and gathering information took a long time, and were limited to local sources, because technology wasn't as advanced. But now, we rely on various technological advancements to navigate, communicate, and accomplish tasks efficiently. However, even today, despite the availability of credible information through technology, the Western bias continues to be reflected in its media coverage of India. This highlights the ongoing issue of coloniality, where Eurocentric knowledge and practices are considered neutral, universal, and apolitical. They often overlook the rationale behind certain policies in India. Instead, they tend to excessively focus on them, using terms like the rise of Hindutva and communal tensions. For instance, they perceive the Citizenship Amendment Act as discriminatory against Muslims, and criticize the removal of autonomy provisions granted to Jammu and Kashmir in the 1950s. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the Western press often compared the situation in India to the Spanish flu of 1918-20, painting a gory picture of the situation. This comparison was made in an unscientific way, and had an overwhelmingly anti-India tone. The Australian media described India's COVID-19 crisis as a result of arrogance, hyper-nationalism, and bureaucratic incompetence. They blamed India's Prime Minister for being too focused on public gatherings, while citizens suffered. The Australian paper used the title, "Modi Leads India into a Viral Apocalypse." The headline suggested that everything had gone terribly wrong in India. The Western media coverage often focused on the sheer numbers of COVID-19 cases and fatalities in India, without considering its large population. They overlooked the fact that this could mislead readers about the relative severity of the pandemic in India compared to other countries. Such headlines not only reveal prejudice, but also ignorance about India's demographic context. Similarly, in the US, the New York Times published a front page entirely covered with the names and selected details of victims, under the headline, "US deaths near 100,000, an incalculable loss." As the presidential elections due in November approached, the mainstream US media did not spare Donald Trump, consistently portraying him as anti-establishment, with no respect for political norms and institutions. This clearly indicates the side they favor. Since 2014, biased reporting on India has become more pronounced. Why? Because of its remarkable growth story and the country's aggressive diplomatic campaign. As a result, the Western media often brings up social issues, exaggerates human rights violations in India, and lectures the country about democratic norms, press freedoms, and religious issues, etc. And as the country is expected to become the world's third largest economy by 2030, its presence in global media is only going to grow. Why is it necessary to kick partisan media outlets out of India? But before that, let's first understand what they actually do. Biased media outlets prioritize sensationalism over truth, thrive on division, and promote hatred and intolerance.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi is widely expected to win, but his second term in power has been marked by deepening religious polarization and increasing Islamophobia. Members of the Muslim community have told the BBC that they feel they are being marginalized and suppressed.
They exploit people's fears and prejudices, turning citizens against each other, for the sake of ratings and profit. In a country where the media is meant to be a watchdog, partisan media outlets act more like attack dogs, tearing down anyone who dares to challenge their narrative. They spread lies, conspiracy theories, and misinformation, poisoning public discourse, and making it impossible to have reasoned, fact-based debates. Additionally, biased reporting also exacerbates social tensions and political divisions, making it difficult to achieve consensus on important policy issues and impeding progress. Their irresponsible journalism undermines trust in institutions, erodes social cohesion, and threatens the very foundation of democracy. Damaging, negative, or scandalous report of Western media. When reporting about India, Western media often focus solely on the negative aspects of the political situation, creating a biased and negative perception of the country and its government. As S.J. Shankar said, they consider themselves political players in India's election process, so they give lectures on various topics without fully understanding them. They exaggerate and claim that Modi has used pliable judges, tax authorities, and other forms of coercion to silence critical journalists, imprison opposition leaders, close down NGOs. They say this is massively underappreciated outside of India. However, they overlook India's significant progress and development in various areas. Even if they do report about the positive side of India, they present the information in a biased and superficial manner, downplaying its importance and impact. For instance, India has become the world's 5th largest economy, and is poised to become the 3rd largest. In the past 9 years, India has successfully lifted millions out of poverty, and it leads the world in digitization, accounting for more than 45% of total digital payments. Additionally, how India's space industry has rapidly grown over the past 2 decades, with successful missions like Chandrayaan, Mangalyaan, and AstroSat, showcasing the country's space exploration prowess, and how Indian-origin professionals are increasingly taking up leadership positions in billion-dollar companies outside India. We can almost call it a CEO factory, given the large number of Indian-origin CEOs in these companies. But achievements of India are often ignored or downplayed by Western media. However, the reports they choose to emphasize about India primarily focus on poverty, portraying the country as facing persistent poverty, with millions struggling to meet their basic needs, lack of development, and social issues, political unrest, etc. But achievements of India are often ignored or downplayed by Western media. Yet, every country faces its own set of challenges, and these issues are not unique, and no country is a utopia. When it comes to critical reporting, Western media often become lazy, as it requires research. And when it comes to creating a false narrative, their laziness disappears. They go to great lengths to manipulate content, misquote sources, and take information out of context to fit their agenda. For example, the BBC made a documentary on PM Modi's alleged role in the 2002 Gujarat riots, despite India's Supreme Court giving Modi a clean chit, clearing him of all charges. They accused the government of bringing Hindu-centric policies. They say Modi prioritized Hindu majoritarianism over economy. Modi promote Hindutva ideology. And attempting to remake India into a Russian-style managed democracy, that is, one retaining all the trappings of democracy, while operating as a de facto autocracy. Anti-Muslim narrative. In India, because Hindus make up the majority of the population, there are often accusations of prejudice against Muslims. Reputable Western newspapers often publish articles warning about anti-Muslim hate speech, lynchings, and even genocide in Hindu-majority India, portraying the country as anti-Muslim. However, if these were true, why hasn't India created detention camps like China? Or resorted to forced religious conversions, like Pakistan? Uyghurs, who have been detained, report being forced to renounce their religion, and were required to sing songs and make statements swearing allegiance to the Communist Party. Fortunately, we have surveys that show how Indian Muslims actually feel. According to Pew Research Center, 89% of India's Muslims report being free to practice their religion. Only 11% said they were not too free. The 98% of India's Muslims ranked unemployment as their top concern, followed by crime and corruption. Perhaps the most damaging, negative, or scandalous report is about Indian democracy, that emerged shortly after Rahul Gandhi was ejected from parliament and barred from contesting the 2024 elections. Western media have thoughtlessly attacked Indian democracy. They prepared tweets and headlines seized by modophobia. Edward Lucis, the Washington-based US national editor of Britain's Financial Times, posted, "Will this be India's last democratic election?" Meanwhile, Hannah Ellis Peterson, The Guardian's correspondent, wrote, "Analysts and opponents have warned, this could be the most one-sided election in India's history." The Financial Times commented with the title, "Mother of Democracy is not in good shape," stating, PM Modi has repeatedly called India the mother of democracy, but the increasing clampdown on opposition parties suggests that this symbol of representative government is not in good health. India has been labeled an electoral autocracy by Sweden's Varieties of Democracy Institute. The reports highlighted that Rahul Gandhi, a prominent opposition leader, was expelled from parliament and disqualified from running in the 2024 elections for a remark implying the country's Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, was a criminal. However, he was ejected after being found guilty of the criminal defamation of an entire caste in a 2019 campaign speech, in which he implied that all Modis, including the Prime Minister, are criminals. The ejection wasn't the doing of the Modi government. The constitution mandates that all convicted felons be immediately removed from parliament. However, Rahul Gandhi participated in the 2024 elections. He contested from Raebareli in Uttar Pradesh, after already contesting from Wayanad, in Kerala, during the second phase on April 26. It's important to note that he has faced legal challenges. He was convicted for 2 years but has been granted a stay on his conviction. With all this relentless criticism, damning and scandalous reporting about a country, its government, and its democracy, what do you think the Western media is doing? They are trying to meddle in India's internal politics and affairs, with support from international organizations or foreign powers, who have their own interests and agenda, in shaping the narrative about India. The Western media, with their inherent bias and agenda, never miss an opportunity to question every move India makes. And their favorite inquiry might be, how and why is India developing so rapidly, with its diverse population, despite efforts to stoke religious or communal tensions? So, to find answers, media houses from around the world, especially from the West, send their correspondents. For instance, in the 2024 election, Australia's ABC Media sends reporters like Avani Diaz to cover stories that consist of misleading and mischievous content. As there was nothing else to cover, she made an episode covering the killing of Hardeep Singh Nijjar. India already has rejected the allegations, with the Ministry of External Affairs terming them absurd and motivated. The government stated that the allegations were aimed at diverting attention from Khalistani terrorists and extremists who are given shelter in Canada. So, the question arises, why was it necessary to make such video during the election period? However, the Indian government issued a takedown notice to YouTube for that episode, and then refused her a standard visa renewal. The episode was about the accusations made by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau of Canada last year, claiming that agents acting on behalf of the Indian government were behind the killing of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, a Sikh separatist, on Canadian soil. The half-hour documentary examined the movement, which advocates for a separate Sikh state called Khalistan, to be carved out of the Indian state of Punjab.